Hi, how's it going? This is Resident of Collinwood for YouTube, back with another Dark Shadows video for you guys and gals, finally. I'm here to give my reaction or review to episode 73. So, Sam Evans visits the sheriff. You see a tracking shot of good old Mr. Evans going to the sheriff's office. Now, keep in mind, this is the same day that Vicky and Roger visit the sheriff. Burke has visited the sheriff. So now we have the trifecta. We have Sam is now. By the way, Burke's not done. He'll be back at the sheriff's office. Uh, just not in this episode. Um, he'll be back in the next episode though. So Sam visits the sheriff to find out what everyone else has been pondering. Hey, did you get that coroner's report back yet? And no, he did not. And I love the conversation between Sam because it's Sam is wanting to know if he's basically, and the sheriff hints at this. So we'll find out if you're going to be Sam Evans the painter or Sam Evans the murder suspect. you know, but he won't be the only one in that suspect list. Roger will be too. Um, does the does or sorry does the do they find out in this episode? Yeah, this is the episode that reveals that Bill Millett, the sheriff, by the end of this episode, is going to tell Elizabeth that Bill Malloy's death was an accidental drowning. But you got to pay it. I'll get back to this because there's other things I want to touch upon. So I'll leave that there. I'll be right back to that ending because it's a good ending. Also, the other, you know, Dark Shadows, ever since its beginning, really just you've always seen with especially with certain characters like Carol and David specifically, this sort of weird line of divided loyalty. Um, Elizabeth is aware of Carolyn's attraction to Burke and her flirtation to Burke. She feels there's nothing she can do, uh, to stop her from seeing Burke. And there is nothing she can do other than being her mother. Um, but you also get, to me, more. Well, I talk about the violent loyalty. I did mention Carolyn, but in this episode, you get David too. And they've been teasing this with David because David and Burke are friends. Burke gave David the crystal ball. Burke is the one who listens to David the most. I love you, Vicky. um, but you also understand that there's a difference between cat and mouse and listening to somebody and humoring somebody. Like for example, Vicky does humor David. Like she does listen to him. I do feel that's something too that Burke does, but Burke takes it to a whole another extreme. You gave a kid a crystal ball, like a crystal ball. Um, I've never gifted a kids a crystal ball. I gotta say, um, a Rubik's cube. Yeah, my son collected them. Um, that's a whole nother matter. That's a different thing. With this episode, you have David, and Liz having an argument. And this isn't the first time they've had an argument or disagreement. They've had disagreements about Miss Winters. We know how David feels, and David still feels that way too. Like you see in this episode, once again, we've seen it with Roger, how David is plotting something. Roger says, just don't tell me, David. And with this episode, you get, oh, did you fire her? I didn't have my lesson today. But you, and Elizabeth says, no, your father took her somewhere, so that was explained to me why you didn't have your lesson today. So you also have David and Elizabeth arguing about Burke. And David explains to Elizabeth, Burke, if I talked about Bill Malloy's murder, if I had questions about it, Burke would answer me. Burke would talk to me about it. And I do think Liz just honestly thinks, look, this was an accident. It happened. Um, you know, I believe she believes what she wants to believe, and that's fine. It doesn't ruin her character at all. With fictional characters, there's always a conception, right? Your conception is not a misconception if you haven't found out all the facts yet, or if you believe there are certain facts that are true in your mind until they are proven different. You want the proof. Okay, Elizabeth would want it proven that Bill Malloy murdered. She would want that proof, and by who? Who murdered Bill? In this episode, again, I'll get back to that. Sorry, I almost segued into the sheriff again, but David says why he's friends with Burke, and David says that you probably think that Burke Devlin murdered Bill Malloy, and that's not true. And you get this really good disagreement and argument with David and Liz, and I've talked about divided lines of loyalty. Dark Shadows, not just in these episodes of the beginning episodes, you get divided lines of loyalty. This is something the writers are going to continue with when they get into the even the heavier supernatural stuff. We've had the mention of ghosts. We've seen two ghosts so far. The first one we didn't know who it was. The second one was Josette, the first appearance of Josette. When Dark Shadows gets into the heavier supernatural stuff, by divided lines of loyalty, you're going to have, obviously, we know Willie works for Barnabas, but Carolyn works for Barnabas. And not just that, when you get into the Phoenix arc, pay attention to how Burke Devlin acts during that arc. He is really, when I say divided lines of loyalty, you might say, well, has Burke Devlin ever really been loyal to somebody? Yes, himself. And he's sort of teetering that line heavily during the Phoenix arc, because in a lot of ways, his love for Laura is getting him mixed up into, he's so, we really see the power hungry, driven Burke of, he just wants to clear his name with Laura, but he does it to such a degree that he even doubts Mrs. Johnson's word. So we're seeing Burke sort of betray himself in a lot of ways during the Phoenix arc. And I think that is really well done. And it doesn't hurt the character. To me, it lets you know the character, if you've ever wondered, can Burke make a mistake? Yes, and the Phoenix arc is a cemented proof of that. But it builds the character in a lot of way, I feel. It adds more to the character from a realistic standpoint. He thinks he can do no wrong, but he also, in that same arc, redeems himself and realizes, hey, there's things I'm too focused on here. And Vicky helps him see that too. So, and again, when you see, for example, when Angelique puts Jeremiah and Josette under the spell of love, again, nobody knows that's happening because nobody knows there's a witch. So you're getting, to Barnabas, it's like, hey, they betrayed me. So you're getting that divided line of loyalty. It's something Dark Shadows continues as a storytelling feature, and I love it to death. It's really, really well done. You get Sam Evans and Maggie at the diner, and this is an interesting conversation piece here. Maggie hears that it's going to be murder. So there's room in this episode. This episode is look, is there filler episodes of DS? Yes. This wasn't just one of those because you have to get into each character's scene to sort of determine if you're getting just filler. Um, to me, you're not here. You're getting something. I've talked about how the sheriff doesn't so much, there's one time he says to Roger, Bill Malloy's murder. He doesn't say probable murder. He says murder outright, and Roger doesn't catch it. Um, in this episode, excuse me, Maggie says that there's gossip going around this corner says murder, and a lot. It's not just her. A lot of people are saying it. Generally, in Collinsport, the gossip tends to be more right than wrong. So you have to sort of weigh that by the end of this episode. And this episode really is the reason I talked about the sheriff. The sheriff had made his decision, I think, long before the coroner ever did. The sheriff could have said, I think it's murder, and here's why. I think I'm being lied to. So if you find something that maybe suggests that, tell me. Again, we don't ever get that. Yeah, I'm recording. Don't come out here, and I'll talk to you here in a minute. Sorry, my son's talking. You're gonna talk to him here in a minute. So to wrap this up, you get a sense of the gossip is that it's going to be in Burke's favor. That hey, Bill Malloy was murdered. But by the end of this episode, pay really good attention to Sheriff Patterson's work to Elizabeth. He says to Elizabeth, if Bill Malloy were murdered, you would want the person caught, and you'd want to find out who did it. Of course, that right there, that isn't something you should have to ask somebody. He should already know that, and he's just more asking it out of a formality than anything else. He wants to know, okay, where are you on all this? Like, no matter who did it, no matter. It's a great question that lets you know where the sheriff is really leaning. But then he tells her it was an accidental drowning. That Bill Malloy, it's over. And she goes, it's over. And he goes, yeah, it's over. He's telling her this two reasons. He wants to see her honest reaction. The relief isn't, oh God, you cleared my brother. The relief is, okay, he really wasn't murdered. Because God, I wouldn't want anyone to murder Bill. That's what the sheriff is looking for. Basically, he's trying to determine. I do believe in this episode, and if you guys disagree, please do. I do believe in this episode that Patterson is more trying to determine if Liz is an accomplice in any way. And does a really good job of finding that out, that the answer is no. Great episode. Another great, again, DS, I've said last night, it's the best written series ever. It is. And this is just another proof of that because you get a lot of cool stuff. My favorite scene in this episode is David and Liz. I really love how they're still. Again, I've talked about divided lines of loyalty. It's something that's been going on, ever since Carolyn found out who Burke was and how attracted she is to him. You get that here. But you also get David's divided lines. He's for Burke. Carolyn's for Burke to a certain point, unless it's in front of her family. But she does defend him in front of her family too. Again, another great episode. Really, really fun. So I'll see you guys later today. Have a good one. Bye.